Episode 31. Why is it always him? Natalie was enraged, and no one could stop her. Liam was the person she cared about the most. She had always taken care of him very well. But now Cheryl had insulted him and hurt him emotionally. She would never forgive her. When Cheryl saw the police arrive, she became even cockier and had no intention of apologizing. The situation was at a standstill. The police were helpless. Just as they were about to restrain Natalie, Samuel stood up and walked over to them. "Captain Bryant, what you are doing is wrong. This girl is clearly defending herself. How can you restrain her?" When Captain Bryant heard the voice, he recognized it as belonging to Samuel Hammond. He went up to him and greeted him respectfully. "Mr. Hammond, you're here. I didn't see you." Suddenly, he took note of what Samuel had said. He was a bit confused and asked, "Can you explain what you mean by that?" If it was anyone else, the captain would have ignored them and done what he had to do. But this was not just anyone, it was Samuel Hammond. The captain had no choice but to listen. No one noticed Bryce, because he was sitting in the corner of the restaurant not moving. Everyone cast their gazes on Samuel. He glanced at Natalie and said, "Captain Bryant, the thing is that this man and woman were bullying this woman and her son. So she is doing what she has to do to protect her child. Isn't it unfair for you to take her away just because you've only listened to what other people have told you?" His words were extremely casual, but the meaning in them was obvious. Captain Bryant realized now how the situation had come about. His face was stern and cold as he prepared to instruct his men to restrain Cheryl and Nick. When Cheryl heard what Samuel had said, she immediately became anxious. "Who the hell are you? Stop making things up. If you turn the tables on me, I'll sue you." Samuel sneered at her, and she couldn't help but wince at his gaze. Then he said to the police, "If you don't believe me, you can go and check the surveillance tapes. It will be obvious that they were the ones causing trouble. Everyone here witnessed it." When the other people in the restaurant heard this, they recalled what had happened. Indeed, this couple had provoked Natalie. They immediately confirmed it. "Yes, we saw them picking on her." Nick and Cheryl became the targets now. The police had finally convinced Natalie to put down the knife, but she did not leave Cheryl and held her hands tightly at the back. Now that things had been cleared up, there was nothing for them to do. Nick didn't want to embarrass himself any further, so he gave Cheryl a look and told her to leave. But Natalie refused to let her go. Even though the situation has escalated to this point, Cheryl still had no intention of apologizing to Liam. She would never give in. Seeing the situation was at a standstill, Samuel said, "You still haven't apologized to the boy, and you want to leave?" The restaurant's other patrons started to criticize Nick and Cheryl too. Nick stood there not knowing what to do. He pursed his lips and said nothing. Cheryl was enraged by Samuel's words to the point that she saw red. She had never imagined that someone would appear halfway through their argument and embarrass her like this. Although Natalie had put down the knife, she was still holding Cheryl's hand tightly, not wanting to leave her so easily. However, Cheryl was adamant. She did not want to admit defeat and allow the other patrons to say whatever they wanted. She would not apologize. But Nick could not bear to stand there and face the criticism of so many people. When he looked at Natalie, there was a hint of complaint in his eyes. But in the end, he had no choice but to lower his head and apologize. "Liam, we're sorry. We shouldn't have said that to you." "Hey, what are you doing? Why should we apologize to them?" Cheryl's expression immediately changed when she heard Nick apologize. Having him apologize to the boy was much more embarrassing than apologizing herself. Now that Nick had apologized to Liam, Natalie knew she couldn't do anything else. She had intended to leave Cheryl, but when she heard Cheryl's question, her eyes squinted dangerously, and she said in a warning tone, "Nick, you heard her. I wanted to let her go, but it seems she doesn't want to leave. This doesn't concern you." She looked hatefully at Cheryl and said very clearly, "You will apologize to Liam, or no one here will be able to save you." Cheryl felt the pain in her hands and let out a groan. She saw the police preparing to leave and felt very resentful. Natalie was determined, and Cheryl knew that Nick and the police would not help her. She had no choice but to reluctantly admit defeat. She glared at Liam and finally said, "I'm sorry. What are you sorry for? Say it clearly. Natalie would not accept the apology if it didn't sound sincere. Cheryl was so furious that one could see the steam coming out of her ears. But since she had already said she was sorry, she took a deep breath to calm herself down and said, "Sorry, Liam. I didn't mean what I said." Liam was shocked by his mother's bravery. He idolized her. Natalie gave Cheryl a glance, satisfied at last that she had apologized properly. Liam didn't feel hurt anymore, and Natalie was no longer angry. She released Cheryl. "In the future, when you see me, walk the opposite way," Natalie warned her with an icy glare. "I won't let you off so easily next time." Cheryl wanted to retaliate, but Nick pulled her away. She left dejectedly, but before she did, she gave Natalie an angry look. The fiasco was finally over. Cheryl and Nick left the restaurant. Everyone returned to their seats and ignored Natalie. Before the police left, they said their goodbyes to Samuel. Only then did Natalie remember the man who had helped her. She looked around for him, but he was nowhere to be found. She searched the restaurant and finally found him in the VIP room. Although she wasn't sure why he had helped her, she thought it would be rude not to thank him directly. So she took Liam and walked into the room. Sir, I wanted to thank you for helping me earlier." Just as she finished speaking, she looked up and saw Bryce sitting in the room. Why is it always him?